Alright, I'm back. This time I am talking about Israel and the apartheid state um, of the Palestinian people. Alright. Israel's policies and actions in its ongoing occupation of the Palestinian territories have drawn accusations that it is committing the crime of apartheid. Leading Palestinian, Israel, and international human rights groups have said that the totality and severity of the human rights violations against the Palestinian populations in the occupied territories, and by some in Israel proper, amount to the crime against humanity of apartheid. Israel and some of its Western allies have rejected the accusation, with a former often labeling the charge anti-Semitic. So I'm sure there is a trillion% anti-Semitic garbage out there talking about these facts straight up, but for malicious reasons. It's true. You could say free Palestine. That could just mean kill Jews. Straight up, that could just mean that. I don't care if that sounds callous. It's just that's how dog whistles seem to work. You have think of the children, but what does that actually mean? It means like stop wokeness, stop teaching diversity or some nonsense like that. So this is factual, but it's also true that it could be anti-Semitic, but the truth shouldn't be anti-Semitic. So who cares? This is completely true, and Israel um, is new, and it's still being protected, sort of as a it is like an experiment basically as it stands. Comparisons between Israel, Palestine, and South African apartheid were prevalent in the mid 1990s and early 2000s, since the definition of apartheid as a crime in 2000 Rome Statute definition has shifted to the question of international law. In December 2019, Committee of the Elimination of the Racial Discrimination announced commencing a review of the Palestinian complaint that Israel policies in the West Bank amount to apartheid. Soon afterward, two Israeli human rights NGOs, Yesh Din and Salam, January 2021, issued separate reports that concluded, in the latter's words, that the bar for labeling the Israel regime as apartheid has been met. In April 2021, Human Rights Watch became the first major international human rights body to say Israel had crossed the threshold. It accused Israel of apartheid and called for prosecution of Israeli officials under international law, calling for an international criminal court investigation. Amnesty International issued a report with a similar findings on the 1st of February 2022. The accusation that Israel is committing apartheid has been supported by United Nations investigators, the African National Congress, and several human rights groups, and many prominent Israel political and cultural figures. Those who support the accusations hold that certain laws explicitly or implicitly discriminate on the basis of creed or race, in effect uh, privileging Jewish citizens and disadvantaging non-Jewish, and particularly Arab citizens. These include the law of return in 2003, citizen and entry into Israel law, and many laws regarding security, land and planning, citizenship, political presentation in the Knesset legislature, education, and culture. The national state law, enacted in 2018, was widely condemned in both Israel and internationally as discriminatory, and has also been called an apartheid law by members of the Palestinian Liberalization Organization, or PLO, which I could make multiple videos on its own, I think, based on what I've been hearing about it. Okay, opposition to prime ministers and other Arabs and Jewish Israelis. Israel and a number of Western governments and scholars, on the other hand, have rejected the charges or objected to the use of the word apartheid. The European Commission considers the term not appropriate to use, quote, in connection with the State of Israel, Some argue that the situation is not comparable to apartheid in South Africa, that Israel's policies are primarily driven by security considerations, and that the accusation is factually and morally inaccurate and intended to delegitimize Israel. Um, Security. So you got people you persecute, and you're scared that if you like back off, they might like attack back. I mean, that's true. I think it's totally valid if you want to protect yourself. You need protection. That's true. Yes, but apartheid isn't the way to do it. Like locking people in a limited location each century, like it seems like judging from the mandate, it just got smaller and smaller, and their land kept getting divvied up. All right, and people like to compare, um, like what Hitler said about the Jews as a possibility, even though it's not true at all, and Christians secretly had the upper hand the whole time. It's still like you don't want to give justification for Israel being corrupt in any way, because conspiracy theorists in America, anti-Semitism in America, actual boogeyman stuff in America, it will spark out. And you already had this Ye-gate, with Kanye saying what he said, pointing out, oh, look who all the Jews owning everything in America and yada, yada, yada. Like, that creates a barrier to talk about any of this. Even though, it's not that complicated. It might be socially complicated, but morally, it is absolutely not complicated at all. Like, you're not allowed to talk about the genocide of the Palestinian people because it makes people uneasy because of the genocide of the Jewish people not too long ago. In fact, not even in less time than the Israel state was created. So you have this cultural memory that we remember of the Nazi Holocaust. We remember that, and that makes us more of allies for the Jewish state than something that happened way before that. Jewish state destroying Palestinian people, created by the Ottoman Empire, British, and now in the hands of the United States. It's all very complicated, socially complicated. These things overlap with each other. Why we won't talk about it overlap with each other. Like, it's not appropriate to talk about it. It's not appropriate to not talk about it. How you want to frame it is truly what matters. Anyways, historical comparisons. In 1961, the South African Prime Minister and architect of South Africa's apartheid policies, Hendrik Verwoerd, dismissed an Israel vote against South African apartheid at the United Nations, saying Israel is not consistent in its anti-apartheid attitude. They took Israel away from the Arabs after the Arabs lived there for 1,000 years. In that, I agree with them. Israel, like South Africa, is an apartheid state. End quote. His successor, John Volster, held the same view. Since then, a number of sources have used the apartheid analogy. In the early 1970s, Arab language magazines of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine compared to the Israel proposals for Palestinian autonomy to the Bruntustan strategy of South Africa. In 1970, an anti-apartheid activist in UK's Liberal Party, Louis Eakes, referred to the situation in Israel as apartheid and was threatened with expulsion as a result. In 1979, the Palestinian sociologist Elia Zurik argued in his book The Palestinians in Israel, a study in internal colonialism, that while not de jure an apartheid state, Israeli society was characterized by a latent form of apartheid. The concept emerged from some frequency in large academic and activist writings in 1980 and the 90s. when Yuri Davis, Mellon Benvenisti, Richard Locke, and Anthony Stewart used the term apartheid to describe Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. In the 1990s, the term Israel apartheid gained prominence after Israel, as a result of the Oslo Accords, granted the Palestinians limited self-governance in the form of Palestinian Authority and established a system of permits and checkpoints in the Palestinian territories. The apartheid analogy gained additional traction after Israel constructed the West Bank barrier. In 2001, the NGO Forum ran separately from the World Conference Against Racism in nearby Kingsmead Stadium in Durban. From the 28th of August to the 1st of September, it consisted of 3,000 NGOs and was attended by 8,000 representatives. The Declaration of NGO Forum adopted was not an official document of the conference. The final NGO document was called for the reinstitution of the UN resolution equating Zionism with racism. End quote. The complete and total isolation of Israel as an apartheid state. End quote. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter wrote the 2006 book Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. His use of the term apartheid was calibrated to avoid specific accusations of racism against the government of Israel, and carefully limited to the situation in Gaza and the West Bank. In a letter to the Board of Rabbis of Greater Phoenix, Carter made clear that he was not discussing the circumstances within Israel, but exclusively within Gaza at the West Bank. In a 2007 interview, he said, "Apartheid is the word that is an accurate description of what has been going on in the West Bank, and it's based on the dire avarice of the minority of Israelis for the Palestinian land. It's not based on racism. This is a word that it's very accurate description of the forced separation within the West Bank of Israelis from Palestinians and the total domination and oppression of Palestinians by the dominant Israeli military." End quote. By 2013, the analogy between the West Bank and Bankistan of apartheid-era South Africa was widely drawn in international circles. In the U.S., where the notion had previously been taboo, Israelis' rule over the occupied territory was increasingly compared to apartheid. The legal standard. So, the UN can recognize this all it wants, but I think people are pretty iffy with the UN because people like to use it as like a dog whistle for like immigrants coming into the nation. Immigrants are needed and yada yada. It's not even a big deal, but that's the reason I think some people don't like the UN, because there's this subjective type of talking points that I guess don't reach greater masses, the greater mass of the hearts of the masses and whatever. Anyways, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid in 1973. The PCA defines apartheid as inhuman acts committed for the purpose of establishing and maintaining domination by one racial group over another racial group and systemically oppressing them. The crime of apartheid was further defined in 2002 by Article 7 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, encompassing humane acts such as torture, murder, forcible transfer, imprisonment, or persecution of an undefiable group on political, racial, ethnic, cultural, religious, or other group grounds. Quote, committed in a context of an institutionalized regime of systemic oppression and domination by one racial group over any other racial group or groups, and committed with the intention of maintaining that regime. End quote. In Israel's 5-yearly Universal Periodic Review, in January 2018, Human Rights Watch and other rights groups criticized Israel. Human Rights Watch Geneva Director John Fisher said, Israel's professed commitment to human rights during its UN review is belied by its unwillingness to address human rights violations in the context of the occupation, the rights of Palestinians, or the illegal settlement activity. Ahead of the review, 8 Palestinian human rights organizations submitted a joint 60-page review. So, illegal settlement activity, is that just Israel existing in a historical context? Because I would have to say this could also be used as a anti-Semitic dog whistle to say Israel shouldn't exist. And I guess, like in the historical term, like sure, you could have stopped them from destroying the Palestinians and stopped the state from being formed, but it's honestly too late now. And I really don't like considering citizens colonizers, but apparently they are. Like, tell me, guys, message me in the comments whether or not you think people who just happen to live there and aren't a part of the system, they just happen to be privileged by the system, like you and I, assuming you're white, like, or rich in some, or have some money in some way. Like, for the most part, privilege is real, and I don't think, in my opinion, that doesn't make you a colonizer, but I will agree to disagree and concede if it does. Like if simply existing and you as a number of the state existing means that you're a part of the colonizer scheme, sure, whatever. I'll be a colonizer then. I just don't think it's right. I'm not gonna. There's not much. There's no policy that I would ever like enact to be like, um, the majority population is not a colonizer. Like, I don't know how I would ever enact something like that. Anyways, okay, 60-page report detailing Israel's creation of an internationalized regime of systemic racial domination and okay. Which amounts to the crime of Israel, Apartheid, in violation of Article 3 of the International Convention of the... Oh, sorry, I'm just reading that really fast because I thought I read that already. Like, I don't know why. Occurred on the 23rd of April 2018, Palestinian filed an interstate complaint against Israel for breaches of its obligations under the ICERD or ICERD. I'm gonna go with ICERD on the 12th December of 2019. The Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination decided that it has jurisdiction over the complaint and would begin to review of the Palestinian complaint that Israel policies in the West Bank amount to apartheid. The committee also expressed concern that Israel had not adopted a legal definition of racial discrimination and issued a number of recommendations. On the 3rd of April 2021, the committee rejected the exceptions raised about the admissibility of interstate communication and requested the creation of an ad hoc conciliation commission with a view, quote, to an amicable solution of the matter on the basis of states parties' compliance with the convention. The ad hoc conciliation commission will issue a report to be distributed among all state parties in ICERD. On the 17th of February 2022, CERD set up a commission composed of 5 human rights experts from the committee. Verene Shepherd, Guncat, Chair, Pansy Taikula, Chansung Chung, and Mitchell Bersalazak on the 4th and 5th of May 2022. The Commission held its first in-person meeting and published its rules of procedure. I feel like nothing of value came out of this because we're still like in this situation. Alright. Sorry, I was just checking. Alright, I'll see you in the next one, guys. I don't want these videos to be super long.